Thank you for listening to the Conform to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. I'm here with George Mays, and it is Free for All Friday time as we continue our series on eschatology, or the study and doctrine of the end times and last things. Morning, George.
Good morning.
You will be representing the amillennial position today.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole community's counting on you.
Yeah, right.
Don't let them down.
Yeah.
Now, this is good. I've enjoyed this. Some people have asked, or there's not a lot of pushback, maybe, and that's not really the point of what we're doing in this series. This isn't a debate
Right.
on various eschatologies.
Mm-hmm.
So Tim, our friend Tim, came in, and I thought he gave a good presentation of what he believes.
Yeah. I heard a lot of positive feedback from people saying I don't agree with him, but he did a great job of representing the position. Yeah, he did a really good job of just kind of laying it out and showing how it's a whole Bible reading.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't just look at one or two passages. I appreciate him saying that this is how I read the Bible.
Yeah, he did a great job, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not our intention to kind of like throw gotcha verses out or
Mm-hmm.
try to debate or push back. We're trying to just inform people, because this is one issue I think where people need to stop being so vitriolic with each other over is, people are ready to anathematize
Right.
each other nearly,
Mm-hmm.
or disfellowship with each other, or throw bombs. Like, this is my personal pet peeve whenever I see this one. When you drop the word faithful in front of Christian,
Mm-hmm.
you're making the Martin Luther that's been passed down genetically to me start to boil. Faithful, when you add faithful Christian, that's like, in my mind, adding to the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not that. So,
Yeah.
though eschatology is important, though. I think.
Oh yeah. We can't ignore it and say, well, because there's all these different positions, it's not important. We should constantly be going back to the text and trying to get at what is actually being communicated. And it's helpful to dialogue with people that we don't always agree with. And even as we were talking with Tim last week, I disagree with his position, but I saw a lot of commonalities. Even though he's looking, his lens are these dispensations. A lot of it is just looking at it covenantally. And so we'll see. So there's a little bit of overlap. There's a little bit of disagreement. So I'll try to lay out a little bit of covenant theology just to show that this is another way of reading the Bible.
Right.
But there are some places in which they overlap.
Yeah. So I think, again, we need to try to push back against this kind of culture where Christians are putting that label, faithful Christian. You need to be very careful of that. It's super arrogant. Like, I know there are young men who would throw that on him because he's a dispensationalist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some 20-year-old who who's never done anything in his life except for read stuff and write blogs. Meanwhile, Tim's gone to 2 different wars. He was a Marine, then he was in the Army. He literally knows what real evil is in the world, and he's been a faithful Christian his whole life. But you're going to try to drop that bomb that you're not a faithful Christian, like if you hold to this other view, this other eschatology. I mean, this is the type of thing that we really need to try to push back against.
And that's why in the first episode we did on eschatology, we're trying to show, like, here are the boundaries. Here are the things that we all have to agree on in order to be orthodox. And then within it, we have disagreements, and we need to learn how to disagree with each other without becoming disagreeable. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It can be really hard, especially nowadays when you got keyboard warriors, jump on social media and just start blasting away
Right.
with no thought for the repercussions.
Yeah, that's true.
But in our churches, we We can't let these secondary issues divide us. We can disagree, and we can tell each other we disagree, but we can still fellowship with one another.
That's true.
Right.
That's right. So we're going to jump right into this, or you have something crazy for me? No?
I've got two crazy things for you, though, Jay. I've got a video and I've got an article I ran across.
Okay. All right. Well, it is Free for All Friday, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
If you want to drop that on me.
Well, I'll do the article first. I came across this. This is from People Magazine, that reputable journalistic source.
Reputable.
Mm-hmm. But I saw this article, this headline, and I thought, who would appreciate this? Jay Jones. Look at this. Look at this headline. We can throw it up on the screen. 77-year-old woman finally gets dream wedding when she marries herself.
What? Oh my! So you know what? This generation, her generation, they don't have dumb ideas like that. You know that?
Yeah,
they just don't. So whoever's over there, not in picture, her offspring probably, or her other relatives, the young kids, they gave her that dumb idea.
So she's from Ohio. I was not expecting that when I read the article. I thought this has got to be California, but she's from Ohio.
Well, why would you ever think that, George?
Well, marrying yourself just seems.
Don't
like
you know Rick Warren's in California? Rick Warren, the great.
Did you ever find that tweet that you were telling me about?
The founder of Spurgeon's College.
Yeah. Did you find that tweet you were telling me about last night?
I can find it. Do you want me to find it?
I was interested in seeing him actually say that
he legit
he's holding
tweeted
the same
out
stuff as Spurgeon.
He did. He said he has the same view of women in ministry as Charles Spurgeon. Oh my goodness. He's also the writer of Hebrews, and he probably we don't go back this far, but he probably helped build the pyramids, and there's all kinds of things he did.
Right. So this lady, she was married briefly in 1965. She divorced after 9 years, and she said here, I have been with myself for 40 years, and she said she wanted to do something special for herself.
Is she divorced, or
she's divorced? Yeah, yeah, she's been divorced since 1974,
right,
somewhere around there. So. After spending much of her life taking care of her children and grandchildren, Fidelia is excited that life is about me now.
It's her grandkids.
It's my turn to do what I want to do.
They did it. It's the grandkids. I guarantee you.
Her daughter helped her find a dress, cook food for the event, and even decorated the retirement home's community room with a balloon arch and other items. I told my daughter, this is the best thing that I've ever had outside of having you kids. This is what I've always wanted, and I'm so happy that you gave it to me.
This is crazy. Maybe.
Oh, man. Yeah. So there you go.
It's the mind virus.
Yeah.
It's the woke mind virus. It infiltrated her.
Yeah. Yeah. She decided, I've spent all this time taking care of you kids. Now it's time to do something for me. I'm going to marry myself.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
I'm going to make myself so happy.
I'm going to go on cruise around the world. I'm going to marry myself.
Yeah. But I've been.
You got anything weird like that cooking up for us, Dad? Any surprises? My dad's changing the camera back and forth. Got anything strange like that cooked up?
No.
Can you become a tap dancer all of a sudden? Fulfill some dream you never told us about? Huh? Got some secret thing that, because you had to take care of us, so you had to.
Now
you had to give up
time.
on dreams.
It's me time.
Give up on your dreams. Provide for your children. Hey, my dad grew up with one pair of jeans and shoes a year. Huh, Dad? That's right.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, and it's just because he was white that I actually have the things I have.
Yeah.
So magically, we went from one pair of shoes and jeans to me having multiple pair of shoes, and it was simply because he's white.
Right.
Yeah, that's what they teach in the universities.
Right.
Or maybe it was because the military. This is a little secret gem. I'm selling. I sell cream sodas on here. Maybe I sell military too. Anybody
Yeah.
can go into the military
Mm-hmm.
and they can immediately jump to another social class. Doesn't matter how poor they are. They can jump into even upper middle class in one generation from
Yeah.
joining the military, black or white
Mm.
or whatever.
Yeah.
You agree with that? That's true. That's true. Even a private.
Got that microphone over there?
We need a mic on him. We could tell crazy stories about privates and the insane things they do.
Yeah.
It's a. Oh yeah. My dad said when you see E-Force driving BMWs, you know something going on. Yeah, drop that whole check on that car. Riding in style. All right. Well,
I've got a video that I've been telling you I need to show you, and I just keep holding on to it. I can hold on to it.
It must be really good.
I can hold on to it no longer because you keep talking about AI.
Oh, you got a good AI?
You keep talking about AI. You keep talking about what AI is going to eventually do.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of talk about
it's going to create an Ultron body for Satan.
That's
You know it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the eschatology one, right?
Okay.
Can we just go crazy for a while? Mm?
There's a lot of talk about how AI is it's intruding in the realm of art, and so a lot of artists are upset with the way that AI is being used because you can tell AI to create this painting. You can give it its what you want in it, and it will make something.
Okay.
And a lot of it looks pretty good. So I came across this. This is an AI generated beer commercial.
All right, I can't wait.
And
can't wait for this.
I want you to see if this is where you see AI going for us. This is an AI generated beer commercial. So let's put it on here. All right. So we've got our you can already
Whoa.
You can already tell that there's something's not right.
Yeah,
there are many things that are out of place here.
Yeah, their faces are off, and
this guy over here on the left side is that doesn't look like a beer to me.
He's got malt liquor right there. That's what he's got.
He got the beer in the like the Pepsi bottle. Yeah. All right, so here we go. This is an AI generated beer commercial just for you, Jay.
All right. Oh my goodness. It's so creepy. Are you sure it's not Pepsi? He licked it. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's the funniest thing I've seen in a while.
Yeah. It's so weird. It gets weirder each time I watch it.
You need to go watch if you're listening to the podcast, you're gonna have when you get somewhere and you're stopped, you're gonna have to pull this up and watch that. That's good. That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Is that where you see AI taking us in the next decade, Jay?
Wow. That's too good. Well, are you ready to jump in or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Well, so today we're looking at what is called amillennialism, and this is your belief. So we did dispensationalism last time, and now we're going to do amillennialism, which does fall into some people. There are those, like I said, who want to throw everybody out, but amillennialism has been around a lot longer even than dispensationalism.
Well, I brought in this book because people may not know this. Have you read this? This is a book by Charles Hill. I'm probably going to butcher the name of it. Regnum Celerum. It's Patterns of Millennial Thought in Early Christianity, and it's maybe a little bit more scholarly than people
Mm-hmm.
may want to tackle. But he walks through the early church, and he shows how historic premill and amillennialism were developing side
Right.
by side. And so he goes back to a lot of original sources and shows like it was called Chileanism.
Uh-huh.
Uh, that's the Greek word for millennia or
Uh-huh.
thousand
Uh-huh.
thousand. And he just kind of walks through
That's
some of the
interesting.
early guys,
I'd like to read that maybe.
and then the
Yeah.
non millennial
Yeah.
guys. So it's been around for
Right. And
as long as the church has
I
been
bring that up
around.
because this is going to be new for a lot of people
Mhm.
that are listening. They will have never heard about this at all.
Yeah, these two streams were around from pretty much the very beginning.
Yeah, I think Origin maybe is the most popular early one for Amil, and then definitely popularized by Augustine.
Yeah, I mean he goes back to like Clement of Rome and some of these guys. He's got some stuff from Ignatius and Polycarp that maybe at least show that this was around.
Okay.
That this was there was. I mean they were already debating this in the second century. That they
Yeah.
already were talking about people that held to an earthly millennial reign and people who didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Now they were probably more on the vitriolic side
Unfortunately.
than we're trying to be after 2,000 years. But it does show they both have developed
Yeah. So I mean,
across church history.
this
So
is
this isn't something new. It's not
Yeah.
something that is novel. This is stuff that the early church fathers were talking about.
Okay. I got a series of questions. I think they're pretty good questions. We'll see. That'll kind of shape this this interview.
Okay.
But if you are listening, you're going to be presented with this, and then mine will be next week. And as Georgia said, this has been debated for 2,000 years nearly. So you're probably not going to get every answer that you want.
Right.
And you may even change your position several times in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's just start with the obvious question. What is amillennialism?
Well, it's a bad name, for one thing.
Okay.
It's a bad name. I mean, it literally means no millennium.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people, when they hear amillennialism, that's what they immediately think.
Mm-hmm.
They think, oh, you guys just ignore Revelation chapter 20 altogether. You just don't deal with it. You don't treat it seriously. And I would love to come up with a different name, but it's been around for a longer than me, and it's probably going to be around a lot longer after I'm gone.
Yeah.
What
would be a better name? Realized millennialism?
Maybe
Current, present
millennialism. I don't know. I mean, nothing's going to catch on.
Right.
It's too deeply ingrained in writings and people's thoughts. But
How about loser eschatology? Huh.
Isn't that every eschatology apart from that post mill?
I'm being facetious, obviously. Yeah. This is the label people are throwing around currently right now on Twitter.
So amillennialism, it's probably helpful to maybe say what it's not and then say what it is, because there's a lot of caricatures about what it is. Like we ignore the pertinent text, we spiritualize everything.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, but just say okay, if we had premillennialism last time, version dispensational premillennialism. So how's that? What is amillennialism compared to that?
Amillennialism teaches that we are currently in what the Bible teaches as the 1,000 years reign of Christ. The 1,000 years is the church age.
Okay.
It consists of the time period between the first and second coming of Christ.
All right.
And then, so the world is going to continue much like it has always continued until right before the end, when there will be a man of lawlessness. There will be, if you want to call it great tribulation, you can call it great tribulation. And then Christ will come and that's the end.
Okay.
He brings with him judgment and salvation,
Okay.
and the new heavens and new earth.
So last time Tim kind of described how there's these kind of periods, this 7-year period the church is raptured out of here,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of God's plan continues with Israel, and then there is this great war at the end, and Christ returns in dramatic fashion, smashes his enemies.
Mm-hmm.
The dead in Christ are raised at that time. Those that are here were made in the air, and then the church returns to the earth,
Mm-hmm.
and then the millennial reign begins.
Right.
Satan is then bound and thrown into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Millennial reign starts for 1,000 years.
Right. So
yours doesn't have that stuff, right?
It's one of the things that I find so appealing about amillennialism is how simple it is.
Okay.
It's really easy to grasp. I've got a chart, but I don't have, I don't have, if you've ever seen like a dispensational chart, there's a bunch of stuff. This is pretty simple. I've got it if you want to pull it up on the screen. One of the things that amillennialists are committed to is the 2-age model.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this age and there's the age to come.
Okay. And then was there a third age prior, the Jewish age? Well, then it ended at the destruction of the temple.
Even in amillennialism, there's some differing
okay.
positions. So you can be a partial preterist. So they would see much of Revelation as dealing with things regarding 70 A.D. And the destruction of the temple by the Romans. So they might talk a little bit about like the Jewish age and the church age. I just like to keep it simple. This age is the present evil age.
Okay.
That's Paul's language. Jesus talks about this age and the age to come when he talks about things like the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. Will there be marriage in heaven?
Right.
The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but in the age to come, they won't. So there's this age. It's the fallen creation. And then the age to come is the new heavens and new earth. And right now we're in an overlap. And so we're in this overlap of the ages as the church age. And so you can see it here. So Christ's death and resurrection, they mark the beginning of the overlap. And now we have new creation in kind of a beginning phase. So Christ is the firstborn of new creation. All who are in Christ are
a new creation.
New creation.
Yeah.
But we are waiting for the age to come, which arrives when Christ returns, and he brings with him final judgment, final salvation, and he consummates the age to come with the new heavens and new earth.
So the overlap of the two ages there on the screen, that you could also put in the word millennium.
Millennium.
Okay.
Yeah, 1,000 years.
All right.
Yeah.
And
which
obviously
which we would say is symbolic.
Okay.
It's not a literal 1,000 years. And I know that's not just an amillennial position. I know that there are some historic premill guys that hold to that also.
Right.
1,000 just means a really long time,
or
an indefinite time period.
That God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills.
Right. Yeah. Does he just own the cattle on 1,000 hills? No. That's a stand-in for he owns
everything.
Right. A day for the Lord is like 1,000 years. Is Peter giving us a mathematical equation?
Right.
That's what some people in church history have done.
1 out of 1,010.
Yeah, right. I mean, there are some people in church history that have tried to do that, and they say, well, 7 days of creation, 7,000 years for human history.
How about what then? Outcome if they did that? Why would there not be a 7,000-year tribulation?
Yeah, I mean it's symbolic.
Right.
I think it's pretty clear, no matter what your eschatological position. I think that we at least need to wrestle with the fact that the book of Revelation is filled with symbols, and not everything is supposed to be taken literally.
So
it's meant to communicate something. We just need to figure out what does it mean to communicate.
Okay. We'll come back to, I think, to some of that interpretive thing. So you wouldn't say, so an example for people that if they're just trying to wrap their mind around it, there's the 44,000, right?
144.
144,000.
Yeah.
And there are many dispensationalists who would take that literally.
Mm-hmm.
There will be 144,000
right.
Jews at the end of time.
Right.
What do you think that stands for, that number?
I think that it's symbolic of the church on earth. The church militant is the kind of the traditional theological phrase, the church militant. And the reason why I would say that is one,
composed of Jews and Gentiles?
Yeah. So there is the symbolic numbers. So it's 12 times 1,000. And then there's also this scheme throughout the book of Revelation where John hears something and then he turns around and sees something. So he hears a voice, he turns around and he sees Christ. He's standing in the throne room of heaven and he hears about this Lion of the tribe of Judah who has overcome. He turns around and he sees a lamb that's been slain. Same person, but different angles. And then when you get to Revelation chapter 7, he hears the number of the redeemed, and then he turns around and he sees a great multitude.
Yeah.
I think it's the same. I think it's the same people, just a different angle. The 144,000 that are numbered are the church on earth. And this, again, we have to remember, Revelation is written to these churches that are suffering persecution. The fact that they're all numbered should be an encouragement, should be a comfort. And then he turns around and he sees the church triumphant, the church that's gone through this great tribulation, that also consists of the church age. John says he's a partner in tribulation with the church in the first century. So he's not looking to tribulation thousands of years in the future. He's saying, we're in it right now. I'm a partner with you in it. But the church goes through it, and they're triumphant. And he sees this great multitude that no one can number from every tribe and language and nation and tongue.
Okay, so that kind of gives us a glimpse into some of the interpretive methods you're using. So the millennium, we're in it now. When Christ returns, he defeats all of his enemies. The dead in Christ are raised. The Antichrist and the beast and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire. The judgment occurs. Sinners are thrown into the lake of fire, the everlasting hell. And then new heavens and the new earth commence then, and we go into the eternal state.
Yeah.
So how did you come to this position? Because, like most people your age, you probably didn't grow up this.
No, I grew up dispensational. And when I say dispensational, I don't mean Tim's dispensational. I mean like Tim LaHaye dispensationalism. I mean, I was fully bought into all of it. Secret rapture. I was pre-trib. 7-year tribulation. Antichrist is literally killed and raised from the dead, and 144,000. All of it. Read the Left Behind books, and that was pretty much me.
Okay.
I read the Hal Lindsey books, Late Great Planet Earth. I remember being in high school, eating breakfast before going to school, and having Late Great Planet Earth there with me at the breakfast table, reading this stuff and reading about Apache helicopters. I remember reading about that. So I was all in, and then got married. I don't know, a few years in, Julia she asked me to teach her the book of Revelation. All right, I can do that. I've taught it to youth before. I've taught it I was a youth minister. I taught it to the teenagers in the youth group. So we sit down and we start walking through it. And she starts asking me, where's that? Where's that in the text? We're walking through. I think we got to chapter 9, and I think I did draw an Apache helicopter for her. I was like, could it be this? Not my best moment in biblical interpretation. She just started challenging me to not just go with what I traditionally had been taught, and not just go with the majority position that just everyone is holding to. She wanted me to actually look at the text.
Mm.
About the same time, I started listening to R.C. Sproul. Started listening to Hank Hanegraaff before he really went crazy and became Eastern Orthodox. And they started challenging me. This all kind of collided. My coming to Reformed theology and expository preaching and eschatology all just kind of collided at the same time. And so my whole world was just being rocked. Like, I don't even know if I was a Christian all this time because I don't even know how to read my Bible. It's like Romans 9. Where did that come from? And things like that.
Are you at college at this point, or
no? This
seminary?
is after. No. This isn't seminary. This is after we've graduated. I'm working at metal fabrication. I'm welding and listening to Christian talk radio while I'm welding. So I'm listening to guys like John MacArthur, and he's just blowing my mind with his just expository verse by verse teaching of the scripture. R.C. Sproul is really giving me deep theology that comes out of exegesis. And then Hank Hanegraaff, he was the Bible answer man. And so you'd get people calling in, and a lot of the questions were eschatology. And so he'd challenge the dispensational position.
Was
so
he
as I'm listening,
is he Amill, or I know he's partial preterist for sure.
He's partial preterist, but I think that I think that if he had to be labeled, he probably would be amillennial, but he doesn't like the labels. So his position. I think it's good. I think he's getting at something. It's the 1,000 years of the saints reigning is juxtaposed with the beginning of the book where Jesus tells one of the churches, I can't remember which one, you'll be tested for 10 days. So they're going to be tested for 10 days, which I don't think that's a literal 10 days either. I think that goes back to Daniel and his friends in Daniel chapter 1. They're tested for 10 days. And then you'll be tested for 10 days, but you're going to reign for 1,000 years. And so I think he's setting up this encouragement, this comfort and hope that you may be tested, you may be tried and persecuted, and maybe even put to death for a short amount of time, but you're going to reign with Christ for a long time, forever. Anyway, started listening to those. Read R.C. Sproul's The Last Days According to Jesus, which R.C. Sproul was post-mill, at least in that book. I heard rumors that he changed his position, but I never saw anything. Did you ever see any evidence that he changed his position?
No.
It's a good book from a partial preterist view. And so I just started exploring the different positions. And I think I pretty much walked through all of them. I think I've held to every position for at least 5 minutes of my life. Dispensationalism. I read a book on the case for historic premillennialism. I became a post-millennial guy for about 5 minutes. Then I was partial preterist, Amill, and then I've moved into what G.K. Bill describes as more of like an eclectic approach. So I've kind of just pulled from all the different positions, but Amill in my interpretation of Revelation 20.
Okay.
So that took years, years, maybe a decade for me to actually settle and say, this is what I see the text saying. This is what I'm going to hold to.
Okay. Now, so here's a question that I asked Tim. I'll ask you: is your position a eschatology or a hermeneutic? I know the answer. I'm just asking for everybody. And coupled with that, what is your hermeneutic, and how is it different than dispensationalism?
That's a big question. It's a big question. It's a hermeneutic. So I would hold more closely to Baptist covenant theology. So we're talking not just eschatology, which I would agree with. I can't remember who said it, that all the Bible is eschatological.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably G.K. Bill. That sounds like something that G.K. Bill would say. That all the Bible is eschatological from the very beginning. It's looking to the end. That's why you've got bookends that are gardens,
right?
because the beginning is anticipating the end. The first Adam is anticipating the last Adam, and you just walk your way through. But I would hold to Baptist covenant theology, maybe a little bit more on the progressive covenantal side when it comes to the Sabbath. So I wouldn't be strict 1689. I'd be a little bit in the middle,
right?
But so as dispensational, so there's a spectrum. I've been teaching a class on biblical theology, so this is all just fresh on my mind. There's a spectrum of biblical hermeneutic. There's dispensationalism would be on one side, and covenant theology would be on the other side. And so, as dispensationalists are reading the Bible according to these dispensations, covenant theology follows the covenants, right? They follow the covenants, and so there's 6 major covenants: Adam, Noah, Abraham, Mosaic, David, New Covenant. And even within that, there's distinction because there's Presbyterian covenant theology and there's Baptist covenant theology. Obviously, Baptist covenant theology,
right?
And so you're following the redemptive historical storyline along the covenants,
Right.
which I always describe as the backbone of Scripture. Like if you don't understand these 6 major covenants, you're going to get off. You're going to get off in a bad interpretation somewhere. You follow the covenants, and there's a real heavy emphasis on progressive revelation. Tim said that.
Right.
I would agree with that, but it's along the lines of the covenants, not particular dispensations. So, so I wouldn't, he had the dispensation of conscience between Adam and Noah.
Right.
I would just say that that's the time period between the broken Adamic covenant and the Noahic covenant.
Right.
It's the fallen world after Adam broke the covenant. But we're still following the storyline, and it progresses. We get more and more information about the coming Christ.
In each covenant?
In each covenant, there's a little bit more that's added to it. There's emphasis on that progression. So we're going from shadows, types, to the reality. And I would say, so there's a big emphasis on typology. So the things in the Old Testament are always pointing to something greater in the new. They're not. They're never meant to be an end in themselves. And so that's going to be a big break from like dispensationalism, is the seed of Abraham, the land, the blessings, the sacrifices, the temple, were always meant to point to something greater. It's not just a one-to-one. There's an escalation in typology, and so the people of God that are the Israelites in the Old Covenant are a type. They're a pattern of the people of God under the New Covenant that consists of believing Jews and believing Gentiles. The Promised Land. We've been going through Hebrews. I don't think the author of Hebrews can be any clearer than he was in chapter 11. That even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob weren't looking for that piece of land. They were looking for a better country. They were looking for a better home. The sacrifices, same thing.
And you would say that
looking forward to
is ultimately fulfilled in the new creation.
New creation, yeah.
So
that's what they were looking to. I don't know any other way to interpret Hebrews 11 than to say they were looking for the new heavens and new earth. That they weren't looking for just the land of Canaan. Paul even brings this out in Romans chapter 4, that the promise was that Abraham and his descendants would inherit the world. Explicitly, it says the world. All right. So that's kind of that emphasis on progressive revelation, that emphasis on typology. It also comes out in allowing the New Testament to interpret the Old Testament, because these are the types and shadows. With the coming of Christ, we have the reality. And so there are things in the Old Testament that are pointing forward to that, but they're written in the language of the Old Covenant. So we have to see, how does the New Testament pick up on some of this stuff? And how does the New Testament interpret the Old Testament? And so by letting the New Testament have priority, and not reading the Old Testament as if the New Testament hasn't come, that really influences my eschatology a lot.
Okay.
Because the New Testament is just, I mean, there's 313 verses, I think, in the book of Revelation, and 250 some odd allusions to the Old Testament. It's just all over the place. How is John using that? How is he interpreting the Old Testament? Paul does the same thing.
Well, I think that's a good place to segue into this next question. It's, how do you interpret the book of Revelation? So there are, and people, when they're studying eschatology, they have several ways, usually. Idealist, there's the idealist view, the historicist view, the preterist view, and the futurist view. Now, people might not even be familiar with those terms at all. So I guess one thing we need to do is maybe try to, describe those views.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. The futurist view sees the book of Revelation as primarily in the future, dealing with things in the future, even to us.
Right.
The preterist view, full preterism or hyper-preterism is out of bounds.
Yeah.
Because they would see all of prophecy as having been fulfilled in the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. That's out of bounds. They would even say, like, that's the coming of Christ. The new heavens and new earth is the destruction of the temple and the institution of the new covenant in the church age. How you liking the new heavens, new earth, Jay?
Right.
Are you enjoying it?
They probably see it as
it's a progressive,
spiritually occurring in another realm. After we die.
Well, and it's a progressively improving condition. So a hyper preterist is going to be post mill.
Yeah.
So they're going to see the world increasingly getting better, and the church is going to Christianize the whole world, and eventually all the world will be Christianized. Anyway, that's out of bounds, so we don't have to spend any more time on that. But partial preterism is within the bounds of orthodoxy. R.C. Sproul held to this, and they see a good portion of Revelation as dealing with things in the past. So the book of Revelation is written to 7 historical churches in the first century, dealing with real things going on. And so they would say that most of the book is dealing with Roman persecution and the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem in AD 70.
And they would take the view of Matthew 24 as that as well.
And
part of it.
And there's even differences in how preterists interpret the book of Revelation. Some will say the first half of the book is dealing with the fall of Jerusalem, and the second half of the book is dealing with the fall of Rome. Some will see all of it. I think one of the things that we're doing in this podcast, and we got a comment that was frustrated by that, is we're showing that there's no monolithic position.
Right.
Even within these major positions, there are other positions. So we need to have a little bit of humility and be like, I could be wrong on this.
And some partial preterists
there are other positions, and they're taking the Bible just as seriously. I mean, we need to not, and this goes along with that, not blowing people up, not taking this, I'm interpreting the Bible 100% correctly.
Right.
We need to at least say these passages on eschatology are really hard, and I could be wrong.
Right.
They could be Apache helicopters. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, Sproul's changed his position several times.
Yeah.
Schreiner changed his in the middle of teaching it to
right.
his church.
My systematic theology professor, Stephen Wellham, he said that he was probably 51, 49%, depending on what day. So he might lean slightly amill one day, he might lean slightly premill the next day. So even these professors that, like, this is what they do, is they teach the Bible they're like, well, I see both sides, and so it just depends on what I had for breakfast. That and even Schreiner has changed. There's a new position.
Mm-hmm. Isn't he about to release a book on
He's
it?
about to release a Revelation commentary with this new. I don't remember
What does he call it?
I don't remember
See if
I
I
should
can
not have
find
brought it up because I can't remember what it's called. Um,
Hmm.
I don't remember. I don't remember. It's got Millennium in the, in
it.
the label, but I don't remember what it's. I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I don't either.
So partial preterists, they'll see most of the book as being fulfilled in the past, but they still would see the physical, the bodily, visible return of Christ, the final judgment of the wicked, and the destruction of the devil, and the new heavens and new earth in the future. Which those are kind of the boundaries of orthodoxy. Historicists see the book of Revelation as there's going to be some overlap, I think, with historicism and idealism, because they both see the book of Revelation as dealing with the entirety of the church age. But the difference with historicism is that they're actually trying to plug in specific events in the book of Revelation.
Right.
So, for instance, you've got the locusts in Revelation chapter 9. They've got the face of a man. They've got the teeth of a lion. They've got hair like a woman. They sound like horses, multitude of horses, and some historicists, I'm sure that out of all the positions, this is the one that there's the most internal disagreement. Some historicists would say that is the rise of Islam. And they would say, well, it looks like the Muslim invaders, and they had like this long hair, and they were riding on horses, and they were shooting, arrows and all this. There's a lot of subjectivity,
right?
In that
they have the French Revolution in there somewhere too, and other things that occurred.
A lot of the reformers were historicists. You read Matthew Henry; he's a historicist. They'll put a heavy emphasis on the Pope being the man of lawlessness. The Roman Catholic Church is Mystery Babylon. It's even written into
the Confessions.
The Confessions. Yeah, it's. I think the American version of the Westminster changed it some, but the original Westminster is like the Pope is the Antichrist. I would say he is an Antichrist.
Yeah, maybe they could have put an Antichrist.
And I think that's how they changed it. I if there's any Presbyterians listening, they can fill us in on that. And then there's the idealist. Idealists see the book of Revelation as not about any particular event, but themes. So the ideas of the conflict between God and Satan, of the persecution of the church. And so it's more, I guess using the label spiritualized would be accurate. I follow G.K. Bill. He calls it eclectic idealism.
Okay.
Where
explain that.
Where he's going to look at those themes, those ideas, but he's also going to draw from all the other positions. And so I would say that there is a good amount of partial preterist interpretation that would be accurate to the book of Revelation. So there's probably a reference to the fall of Jerusalem in Revelation chapter 11, where he's commanded to measure the temple, but don't measure the inner sanctuary. Just measure the outer court, because the outer court's going to be trampled by the Gentiles for 42 months. That's the same language that Jesus uses in the Olivet Discourse, talking about the destruction of the temple. So could be a reference there. The beast of chapter 13 is a conglomerate of the beast of Daniel chapter 7. John and his readers, I can't imagine them thinking of anything other than the Roman Empire and emperor worship. Take a mark, pinch of incense to Caesar, or we're going to kill you. Like the readers are not looking for something that's going to happen 2,000 years in the future. John is writing for them to persevere in the tribulation they're going through.
Right.
And so I think that there's some partial preterist importance there. But as an eclectic idealist, I would say that it's not just confined to Rome. It's any world government that does the same thing that the Romans were doing. There's not just one beast. That's why it's a conglomerate of all these beasts. It's all of these godless governments that set themselves up against Christ and his church. They are accurately a beast. They're a monster. So I'd say our government today, as it's promoting all of these abominable things, and it really is bent away from Christianity, I would say that our government is a beast.
Do you see then some type of unfolding typology that would culminate at the end of time in a final
beast,
powerful beast? How about a man of lawlessness as the head of this beast?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I used to hold to partial preterism, and I really, 2 Thessalonians 2 is that's a difficult chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Even Augustine is like, I confess I don't know what the apostle is talking about here, because he just uses a bunch of pronouns.
And he says he's actively being restrained.
Yeah, and he says
but he will appear.
And you know what I'm talking about, and there's a lot of difficulty in there. But I think and so partial preterists should be like, well, that's Nero, or that's
right.
That's Caligula, or they'll try it. That's what was the name of the guy that led the rebellion in Jerusalem? I can't remember his name right now. There was a guy who actually he actually led a rebellion in the city, and they went in and killed all the priests in the temple. They took over the Temple Mount. It was the 3.5 years of the Jewish war in Jerusalem. From everything I've read from Josephus, it was hell on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can see a lot of the partial preterist interpretation of that, because it was just a cataclysm,
right?
Both inside and from the Romans on the outside. But I think that I see the fall of Jerusalem in typological terms.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is what happens to this city for rejecting Christ. I think that's what Jesus is setting up in Matthew 23 and 24. What's going to happen to the world? Same thing, on a massive scale. Christ is going to judge the world, just like he judged Jerusalem in AD 70. But I see a final man of lawlessness. I just can't read 2 Thessalonians 2 any other way than this is a future guy. And that chapter actually plays a role in my interpretation of Revelation 20. Also, I think they're parallel passages.
So there's a final man at the end.
Yeah.
Is the activity of Satan in the earth culminates in this man? He's empowered supernaturally?
Because, and we haven't gotten to it yet. I know we'll get to it. Satan is released.
Right.
And he goes out and he deceives the nations into this final rebellion.
And he's empowered. This man is doing miracles and things,
yeah,
right?
It seems that way. It seems like he's doing signs and wonders to deceive, if possible,
even the
elect, right? And he sets himself up as God, and he persecutes the church, and it looks like the church is about to lose. That it's world persecution. They're trying to stomp out Christianity, and the church is it's like a singular city, whereas the man of lawlessness and his army is like the sand of the seashore. And then right when they think that they've won, Christ comes, and he slays them all.
So
and it's a final cataclysm that judges the unbelieving world.
Yeah. So do you believe in essential to the dispensational premill is the rapture? That the church is raptured out of here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is there a rapture in your position, the all-male position?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's again the word rapture. It comes from the Latin of caught up,
Mm-hmm.
from First Thessalonians chapter 4. But the difference is it's not secret.
Right.
Um, again, if I know there's dispensationalists that are listening and they're just shaking their head like, "Oh, George, I wish that you would just do better." Um, I, I just can't. I can't see a secret rapture in First Thessalonians chapter 4.
I can't either.
Um, I mean, we want to take the Bible seriously, and I would appeal to my dispensational brothers and sisters. You claim to read the Bible literally. Read it literally here. It says that the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise. Um, that's either a Christian dog whistle that only Christians can hear, or Jesus was really bad about coming back secretly.
Right.
And the third option is this isn't secret. He's visible
Right.
and it's loud. There's a great cry. I think Jesus says in John chapter 5, he says that a day is coming when all who are in the grave will hear the voice of the Son of God and they will come out. I think that's this. I think he's telling the dead, come out of the grave, come to resurrection or come to destruction. The sound of this trumpet blast. This gets into my interpretation of Revelation. I think this is the seventh trumpet. It's the final. This is the final trumpet when Christ comes. But the rapture, it's not secret. But it is for Christians. They're caught up. The dead in Christ rise first. Then we who remain will be caught up to meet him in the air.
Mm-hmm.
But the picture is not of it's not of Christians meeting Christ and then going back up. This is the picture of the triumphal procession. It's the picture of the king coming back to the city, and the citizens go out of the city and meet the king, and then they escort him back into the city. That's the picture that Paul is painting of this Roman procession of the conquering general who comes back to the city. The people go out, they welcome him back in, and they don't leave. They
Right.
come into the city. They prepared themselves to celebrate this triumphal procession. That's the picture. Christ comes, this triumphant king. His people go out to meet him, and we all come back.
So we're caught up into the air.
We're caught up into the air. We're transformed, glorification, and we come back. And I think we're part of the army that slays the wicked. I think we're part of it. And then Christ comes. There's final judgment. There's finality to it. And then there's a new heavens and new earth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what. So there's a rapture.
There is. So there is a rapture,
but it's
because that word is in the text.
I mean, they're caught up. I mean, I don't know how you would. We meet him in the air. I don't know any other way to interpret that.
Yeah.
I mean, we could say this is just a metaphor, but I don't know what it's a metaphor for. It's a metaphor for being translated and being caught up into the air. Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, but it's not a rapture to take us away. It's a rapture that we meet Christ and then we come down to the earth.
Yeah. So
when he comes back.
What was interesting to me about this is I had a New Testament backgrounds class, very in depth on, the Greek world and the Roman world, and this language is chosen not only in this place by Paul, but also when he speaks of Christ leading us in triumphal procession,
right?
And the aroma that is left, the smell of how does he word it?
Death.
There's smell of death to some.
It's death to those who are perishing.
Death to perishing.
Yeah.
And the pleasing aroma to those who are being saved.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So in the triumphal procession, here's what would happen. Every Roman knows about this. So Caesar would go to some campaign place, right, where there's a great triumph and victory.
Right.
Then he'll return as a great conquering military victor. And in a big triumphal procession would be those that he's conquered.
Right.
And they reek. They stink. So that
they're prisoners of war.
Yeah. And they throw all these petals out everywhere.
Yeah, they kind of prepare the city.
They try to mask the smell.
They put all these flowers and they decorate the city, and I mean, if you've seen some of these old movies and they're coming in and there's like flower petals
Right.
coming, that's a triumphal procession.
Uh-huh. And they had the smell of death because they're marching to their death.
Right.
Because they would be taken to the Colosseum. They would be killed,
Mm.
be caused to fight each
Yeah,
other
the
for entertainment.
public execution.
Yeah, public executions, all kinds of stuff. And what's interesting is that I never picked on is that we're the ones that are the captives in that passage.
Yeah.
That Christ has conquered us through the
Mhm.
gospel,
Yeah, he's
and
leading
he's
us
leading
around
us in triumphal
triumphal
procession. And then he says in this verse here, it's the same thing. Picture the same imagery. There's a trumpet blast that the
Mm.
Romans would give.
Mhm.
Doo, 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 you know, whatever. Caesar's coming.
Right.
And everyone in the city leaves the city.
Yeah.
And then they come back into the city with
Right.
the victor.
Yeah.
And that's the imagery he's using here.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, I'm like,
Yeah.
this is how they would have read it.
Mm.
The Greco-Roman world,
Yeah.
to which this was written, they would have understood clearly what was being communicated.
Yeah.
This is tipping my hat a little bit, I guess, into mine next time,
Yeah.
because I believe the same thing about the rapture.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have to critique other views, because the difference is shown in how we critique them. I just don't see how you get secret, invisible rapture.
Well, I think
when it talks about the coming of Christ,
Mhm.
it always seems to be visible.
I think they build it from other verses, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Matthew
I know.
24, maybe.
Yeah, I mean we're not talking about we're not
Yeah.
just going after secret rapture, but here, I would say that there's a rapture. It's just not secret,
I wanted to ask that because some people would say you don't believe in a rapture,
right?
but I want to give the opportunity to say that you do.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
I don't use the word rapture very often.
Uh-huh.
The word I use is resurrection. It's resurrection or glorification.
Okay.
Either one of those, they're interchangeable. We are glorified when Christ comes. We are resurrected. We are raised with Christ. Yeah.
Good. Very good. All right. I think we've touched on this. How does your view work with Matthew 24? Not going to spend a lot of time here, but are you partial preterist in that interpretation of Matthew 24, or where are you at there?
I mean, I think you have to be at least partial preterist with some of it, because Jesus is talking about the disciples are asking him about the temple,
right?
And he says not one stone is going to be left on another. That's not a future event for us. That's something that happened 2,000 years ago.
Right.
That literally happened. The Romans came in and they destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, and they set it on fire, and the gold was melting between the stones, and so they took the stones off of each other to get at the gold. The fleeing to the mountains, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
That literally happened. No Christians were killed that is wild. Read Josephus. Read Josephus was a Jewish deserter. He deserted from the army. And he's writing this history. He actually lives through this time period. He witnessed a lot of the stuff. He kind of became kind of a personal assistant to Vespasian and later Titus. I don't know what his official position was.
Official brown noser?
Maybe that could be it. They spared him for some reason, but he's writing about this, and he talks about how before Vespasian and Titus came, there was another Roman general and his army, and they'd almost broken through the wall, and then for some reason they leave. And I think it's even Vespasian. He's like, there's no reason why he should have done this. Well, what happens after he leaves? All the Christians leave. They'll leave the city, and they go up to Petra. And so they're spared from the destruction of Jerusalem, just like Jesus told them to do. He when he tells them to flee, he's not talking to Christians in the year 2050 to flee to the mountains. He's talking to the Jews that are in Jerusalem. When you see the abomination of desolation, Luke dumbs it down for the Gentiles in Luke 21. He says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, he replaces abomination of desolation with when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies. Obviously, that's his interpretation of the abomination of desolation. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, flee.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened.
And
But
the Christians obeyed and got out.
and they obeyed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he even says, "Let the reader understand." he's talking to the
But
the
the
original.
non-believing Jews who didn't believe
Yeah, they all
Jesus,
stayed.
how
Yeah.
many died? 1.5 million or something like that.
Josephus said, and there's debate over whether this is hyperbole or not. He said that the roads were just lined with crosses.
All
He
right.
says there was over 1 million that were crucified, and that's on top of what actually happened in the city.
Right.
Because, like I said, it was hell on earth.
Cannibalism.
Cannibalism.
Because they laid siege to them.
Yeah,
And no food.
They were the zealots were assassinating leaders.
Mm-hmm.
That's a partial preterist interpretation of Revelation chapter 9. These locusts that have the face of a man, they have the hair of a woman. These zealots would dress up like women, and they'd
Stab
people. Yeah.
It's the origins of Assassin's Creed video game, actually.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what they would do. They'd have these daggers hidden. I can't remember what they were called, but they would assassinate these people.
Yep.
And yeah, so I think that a lot of the Olivet Discourse has already happened, but there is, and I know there's different interpretations. There's even amillennialists that interpret the Olivet Discourse differently. When Jesus says this generation will not pass away before these things happen, it's hard to, with the way that he uses this generation elsewhere in the book of Matthew, and he says it at the end of Matthew 23. He says all these things are going to happen to this generation.
Mm-hmm.
Who's he talking about? He's talking about the people that are standing there listening to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's at least some stuff that Jesus is talking about that's in our past. But there's other things that are future, like the gospel of this kingdom will be preached to all the world. I think what he's doing, so the disciples, and Calvin takes this position also, Jesus says, you see all these stones, not one will be left on another. He goes out to the Mount of Olives. His disciples come to him and they say, when will these things be, and when will be the signs of your coming and the end of this age, I think is what
right.
they say.
And he divides it into
and he
two.
divides it. They're asking one question, because when they hear about the destruction of the temple, they're thinking, well, there was common belief that this temple is going to remain standing until the end of the world.
Yeah.
And so they're coming and saying, when's the end of the world going to be? When's the destruction of the temple, and when's the end of the world? And they're asking one question, and he divides it. And he says,
the destruction of the temple.
Here's the signs for when the temple is going to be destroyed, but here's that day.
Yeah.
No one knows.
Yeah. Here's the signs of what will happen before the very end.
And so he says, you're going to hear wars and rumors of wars, and there's going to be earthquakes, and there's going to be famine, and they're even going to kill you. And I think that, and he says, this is not the end. It's just the beginning of birth pains. I think going back to my interpretation of the Olivet Discourse in Revelation, I think he's talking about this is going to be the pattern of stuff that's going on until the end. This is not the end. It's just the birth pangs. And then it's going to get real bad right at the very end. But you're not going to know the day or the hour when Christ is going to come.
That's good. Yeah.
And so it's going to be like the days of Noah. People are going to be giving in marriage. They're going to be just going about their daily life. And then destruction's going to come upon them. And that one will be taken and one will be left. I don't think that's the rapture. I think it's judgment. The person who's because it's the picture is of the flood.
Right.
It's like the days of Noah.
Yes.
One will be taken, one will be left. The one who's taken, you don't want to be the one who's taken. In that context, you can't take that context and then put it on 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and be like, oh, they're talking about the same thing, and we're gonna take it in its context right there in Matthew chapter 24. You don't want to be taken. You want to be left, like Noah. Noah was not taken; he was left. The ones who were taken in the flood. You don't want to be taken in the flood.
In the end, will come upon you in this fashion.
Yeah. So people are going to be going about their daily business, and then judgment is going to come. And some people are going to be taken in judgment, and you want to be left. You want to be one of the people that are still here when judgment is done. you want to still be left standing, and that can only be true if you're trusting in Christ.
Doesn't make that dope of like a novel series though.
I will agree that no one is going to be writing, a 20-book series on from the amillennial perspective, because it's just going to be like, well, today Timothy went to work,
and then the end came,
and then Jesus came back. The end. Like it's not. It really is not dramatic. It's not like it. You're not going to be making a movie about it.
Right. You could call the movie The Surprise.
The Surprise. Yeah, that's good. That's right.
I got 2 questions left for you here, George, because I think we've hit on most of the other ones, at least in some fashion. Okay, so one question people will have is they'll hear, and they probably just picked up on it, or they've heard about amillennialism, and they've heard that, okay, we're in the millennium. You believe Satan is bound, thrown into this pit for 1,000 years. And they would say, but, I don't understand that. I don't see how that can be given the current state of, where we're at.
Right.
So how do you explain the binding of Satan during the millennial reign?
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that this is the problem verse, right? Like the problem verse for amillennialism is the passage on the millennium. Satan is bound for 1,000 years. Okay, so you asked this, and we didn't really get around to it. My reading of Revelation, we talked about like the main positions, but we didn't talk about how I actually interpret the book of Revelation.
Okay.
Except that I would take kind of an eclectic approach, and this feeds into my interpretation of Revelation chapter 20. So I see Revelation chapter 20 as a series of repeated cycles. So when I read the book of Revelation, I don't read it in chronological order. Okay, and that's a big deal, because I don't think that chapter 19 and chapter 20 are chronologically after each other, and I think that's going to make it or break it. I think.
Yeah. So
So I hold to what's
the same story is being told
Yes.
4 times.
7 times.
7 times.
7 times. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is it's called recapitulation. This is not a wild, far-fetched thing, because we see it in other places in the Bible. You can go all the way back to Genesis 1 and 2. It recapitulates. There are people I've read liberals that have used the chronological reading of Genesis 1 and 2 as a reason to believe in like theistic evolution. Because look, there's creation, he creates man, and then in chapter 2 he creates man again. Right? It's not chronological, it's recapitulation. My Old Testament professor, he would, and he's probably going to have to come up with a new, I think he's retired, so he's probably good. He uses the picture of a stereo. You use a stereo, Jay?
Yeah.
You hear one speaker, and you get part of the song, right? And out of the other speaker, you get another part. You put it together, and you get the whole song.
Right.
That's what recapitulation does. Another picture that he used was like a diamond. Like you can look at a diamond from different angles, and you can, like, the way that the light hits it will bring out different colors. That's what the book of Revelation does. That's what Genesis 1 and 2 does. You're looking at the same event from 2 different angles. Here's creation in general. Here's creation specifically of Adam in the Garden of Eden. The creation of man in chapter 1, verses 26 through 28 is the same creation as what's found in chapter 2. It's just, we're just viewing it from a different angle. The book of Judges is not occurring strictly chronologically, because by the time you get to the end of the book, Phineas is the high priest, and Phineas was the high priest at the beginning of the book. So it's not these different judges. They're not this one, and then this one came, and then this one came, and then this one came. There's a lot of overlap.
Okay.
And it's arranged thematically. Not chronologically, thematically.
So
a lot of the prophets do the same thing. They'll tell about judgment, and then they'll start talking about judgment of the same thing. You're like, why are they repeating themselves? But if you look, they're looking at it from different angles and they're using different language. But it's the same event. They're just talking about it in repeated cycles. And so I think that's what's going on in the book of Revelation.
So
I have an interesting little.
So do you have 7 different visions, or are they some visions just kind of they morph into the other? How does this go?
They well, here I've got a picture.
Okay.
As a little creative picture I found. It's called the kaleidoscopic binoculars of Revelation. Progressive parallelism is another term for it. You can see down here with the lenses, you can see the 7 cycles. Chapters 1 through 3, 4 through 7, 8 through 11, then 12 through 14, 15 through 16, 17 through 19, and 20 through 22. They're telling the same story. They're just telling it in different angles, and it's repeating over and over and over again. And what really, even when I was a dispensationalist, I had a hard time understanding the book of Revelation in some places, because you get to like the end of chapter 6, and it says, when he opened the 6th seal, he looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, the full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich, and the powerful, and everyone slave and free hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? And I always read that. I'm like, that sounds like the end of the world. And as I studied more, I'm convinced that it's the end of the world. And then it picks up again, and it tells the story over again. So the seals are telling the entirety of the church age, and it ends with the second coming. The 7 trumpets, they just start the cycle over again, 8 through 11. And at the end of chapter 11, you know what happens? The end of the world, the end of the world again. It says that the 7th angel blew his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. 24 elders, they worship. They say, we give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, who is and who was, for you have taken your great power and begun to reign. The nations raged, but your wrath came, and the time for the dead to be judged, and for rewarding your servants, the prophets and saints, and for those who fear your name, both small and great, and for destroying the destroyers of the earth. It sounds like the end of the world again. And I think that that's what's going on. I think that there's just these repeated cycles, and they're telling the same story from different angles. And the first half of the book, 1 through 11, is telling kind of the story as people would experience it on earth. And then the rest of the book is more of, here's what's going on in the background. So you've got
where do you have that break at?
Chapter 12, where it starts talking about the dragon and this war in heaven. So pull back the curtains. This is what's going on. It's actually the war between God and the dragon. And why are you suffering? Like, why are the saints going through tribulation? They're dying. Why are the martyrs under the altar crying out for vengeance? It's because the dragon is he's inspiring the beast to kill them. So there's this repetition of the same story. And then when you get to chapter 19, it's the coming of Christ. But then chapter 20 is not chronologically after 19. It's telling the story again.
So it starts over in 20?
It starts over again, and it's really it's so the circle is getting tighter.
Okay.
So it's building towards something. And so when you get to chapter 20, you only have 11 verses, but it's telling the same story over again. It's just telling it really fast, and it's telling it from this different angle. So I think that it's just repeating the same story of the church age that ends with the coming of Christ and judgment. And chapter 19 does the same thing, and then chapter 20, it does the same thing again. And so you see the church is being persecuted by the world, and then Christ comes and judges them, and there's final judgment. So with that reading, the devil is bound at the beginning of the church age, and he's released at the end of the church age. So that so getting back to your question,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Um, I think that I would have a really hard time with this if Jesus hadn't used the same language in the Gospels. So Matthew chapter 12, he talks about no one can come and plunder the strong man unless he does. He binds the strong man, right? He binds the strong man, and then he can plunder him.
Right.
Who's the strong man? I think it's the devil. I think that's the point of the story is that Jesus comes, he casts out demons. The Pharisees are saying he cast out demons by the power of the devil. And you've got the teaching on blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. And he says that if the devil's casting out demons by Satan, Satan's casting out Satan, then his kingdom is just going to crumble. But if I'm casting out demons by the power of God, then you know that the finger of God is here. And he says that no one can plunder a man's house, the strong man's house, unless he binds him first. So I think that's what's going on. How can he? Why is he doing this? How is he casting out demons? How is he doing all these miracles? It's because he's binding the strong man. Same language is used in John chapter 12. He's getting ready to go to the cross. And he says that, let me read it exactly so I don't butcher it. John chapter 12, he says that, where is it? There
now
it
is the ruler of this world cast out.
He says, now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. And then we've got Revelation chapter 12, which is, I think, telling the same story here. Christ comes. The dragon tries to kill him. He's caught up to God. And then the dragon, there's a war in heaven, and the dragon is cast out. And he can't do his primary work because he's been cast out of heaven. And then 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, I think, is parallel to it, that when he's talking about the man of lawlessness who will be revealed, and you know what's restraining him. It's restraining him right now until he's taken out of the way. I think that it's the same thing. You know what is restraining him now, so that he may be revealed in his time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way, and then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will kill with the breath of his mouth and bring to nothing by the appearance of his coming. So I think what's keeping the lawless one from coming right now is Satan is bound. But when Satan is unbound, the man of lawlessness will come. He'll be revealed.
Okay.
So now the question is, what does that mean? What does it mean that Satan is bound?
Yeah, that's what I was going to.
Yeah. And this is, I think this is where, this is the difficulty of the position, because it depends on what you think that means. I don't think it means that the devil is inactive. I think we have to read it in, this again, it goes back to how we read our whole Bible. If we read it in this redemptive historical progressive way, in the Old Testament we see that the gospel only goes to the Jews, and it goes to maybe a handful of Gentiles. You've got Rahab, Ruth, Naaman, the leper. You've got the Ninevites when Jonah preaches to them. So you've got little places where the Gentiles hear it, but for the most part, it's confined to Israel. Now, with the coming of Christ, the devil is bound from deceiving the nations, and the gospel goes out to all the nations. That's what Jesus says in John chapter 12. That now the ruler of this world is cast out, and I, when I'm lifted up, I'm going to draw all people to myself. It's not just going to be a people of God that consist of Jews. It's going to consist of people from every nation. And Satan is bound from preventing that. Like he's still active. He still, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking whom he can devour, but he can't prevent the gospel from spreading. The gospel is just going to keep going. But when he's released, when he's able to, and the man of lawlessness one is revealed, then the nations are going to be deceived again, and there's going to be like a coalition against the church, and they're going to surround the church, and the church is going to look like it's. I mean, the description is of the unbelieving world like the sand of the sea, and the church is like a camp. I think that's what it means.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. All right, last question. We're pretty much out of time, so we're going to wrap this up. What do you think is the sanctifying strength of your position? How does this? I know you believe it is the position, but what do you think? What benefit is this to you spiritually?
I think it shows that the Book of Revelation is for us. It's not for tribulation saints. Like, it's not for people in the future. It's for us. It's meant for our encouragement. It's the Book of Revelation is one big warning passage, right? Like, here's what's happening. This is not just something that's going to happen sometime in your future, so you need to be doomsday prepping or whatever. Today, the beast may demand worship. What are you going to do? Are you going to worship him? If you do, here's what happens.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't, then you'll reign with Christ. No matter what happens to you, here's your future, and it's glorious. And this is a promise that's held out for all saints of all times until Christ comes. And so no matter what it looks like here and now, no matter how dark it gets or the opposition, we've got this hope.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
And so I think that's probably the primary thing. And there's little things that might change how we live, maybe, from like a purely futuristic viewpoint. But I think that's the big one, is looking at the whole book of Revelation together and saying, not what can I figure out what this is,
right?
But what's the overall message? Because even at the end of the day, all of these views are still going to be here. Like, we're not going to solve the eschatological debate here on this podcast. Yeah. But even though we're gonna disagree on the details, the overarching message of the book of Revelation is crystal clear. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't miss it. And I love that. I don't know why God allows his church to have different interpretations. I mean, we have the same commitment to the Bible. We want to take it seriously. We want to get at what does it actually mean. And yet we come to different positions. I don't know why God allows that. I don't know why God allows people to read Romans chapter 9 and come away with different opinions on what it means. But the overarching message of the Bible is crystal clear. And that's really the beauty of the scriptures, is we need to look at the details, and we need to think through them and try to come to an accurate interpretation, but don't lose the overarching message just because you're so hung up on, well, I think there's a secret rapture, and if you don't think there's a secret rapture, you may not actually be a Christian.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Well, the main message is that Christ is going to come and he's going to glorify his saints. Mm-hmm. We can all agree on that. Right, that's the hope.
Right,
that's the hope. So hopefully, our conversations will continue to do that.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, thanks for tuning in today. Second episode where we are diving into eschatology. Next time we'll do my position, which is historic premillennialism. It is not to be confused with dispensationalism at all. It falls under the realm of covenant theology, really. And then after that, we're going to have our friend Corey come out for post-mill. So you're going to get them all. So hopefully this has been beneficial and educational for you, but our hope and our desire is, as always, to help you to be more conformed to Christ. So that is the goal, that you would be a better Christian after listening to this podcast. So if this is useful and helpful to you or entertaining, please give us a like, a subscribe, a share. You can write us a review. I always tell people to go ahead and do those things, and they never do them, George. But hopefully you can do that, and we'll see you next time. We'll be back next week. Hope you'll join us. See you then. Bye-bye.